So a lot of fun. So we're going to start off with method 1, which is our roto. So as I said before, we have our hero eye like that, which is our left eye for this project. And along with that, we also got this lovely alpha mat here, which I can quickly show you guys. And obviously it's animated along with the plate, which is very nice. Now on top of the full alpha mat, we also have just the floor roto. So we're going to use this to extract all of the important elements from the comp, which in our case is going to be the floor, the dad character, and the boy character. So the first thing we're going to do is do the boy roto. So I'm going to take the full alpha mat that you can see there, and we're going to create a rough garbage mat just around the boy. And then we're going to basically stencil out the floor section using the floor alpha that we had earlier. So if I view that, you can see that we've lost his legs, but the rest of him is kind of where we want it to be. So at that point, you don't have really any other option than to go in and actually sit down and roto the legs back in, which we've done here, which is a lot of fun, obviously. And finally, we're going to blur that slightly, and we have our nice alpha mat for just our boy. So we're going to do exactly the same thing with the dad. So we start off with kind of our rough alpha. I'm going to basically isolate him with a garbage mat, and then add in the alpha back for the legs. Now I'm just blowing these at the end just to create a nice soft edge on that as well. So we've now extracted both of the main characters from our shot. So the next thing we need to do is look at how we're going to approach the floor. Now, as I said before, we're kind of doing a kind of custom depth map, and depth maps, as I'm sure all of you know, basically are kind of a gradient between black and white. In our case, white is going to be closest to the screen and black is going to be the furthest away. So over our floor, we're actually going to lay a ramp that looks a little bit like this. We've got black in the top left-hand corner and white in the bottom right corner. And so we're going to overlay that using an in merge over our floor, so it looks a little bit like that. So you can see this kind of left-hand section of the floor is a little bit further away in our depth map than this bottom right-hand section. So once we've done that, it's time to go in and start adding in our boy and dad characters. So just with some simple merges, I'm just merging those straight over the top, which you can see like that. But at the moment, they don't actually have any depth to them. They're kind of just sitting straight at 1 on our depth map. So we actually need to go in and grade them into position. So I'm just using 2 custom grade nodes here just to kind of drop them into place on that depth map. Now, one of the things with this method is it is very creative. You can kind of choose where the depth of these characters are going to be, but it's not based upon any real-world values here. You're just going in and trying to make it look right to you. So in this case, I just kind of made their feet match that section of the depth map just roughly, so you know that they're sitting at that position on the floor. So with that done, the final thing I did is add an overall ramp to the rest of our shot, just so we can displace that background plate as well off into 3D space. And with that, we've got a lovely green node here, which tells us that our depth map has been created. So we're all happy at that point. The way you can use this depth map information within Nuke, there's a couple of ways to do it to kind of distort an existing plate. One of the methods you can use is eye distort. And what I've done here is basically shuffled our depth map into the depth channel of our original plate, as you can see there. Go back to RGBA. And using the eye distort node, we're basically applying a distortion to the right-hand plate only. And in case you don't know, most of the nodes within Nuke, if not all of the nodes, as soon as you're in a stereo comp, you can actually split off each individual eye. So if I roll down this option next to UV scale, you can see we've got a value for the left eye and a value for the right eye. Now 1 basically means no distortion at all, so I'm not doing anything at all to that left eye, but I'm distorting the right eye plate by a value of 8. So if I view this and switch between the left and the right eyes, you can see there is a subtle distortion in there. And once we run that through an anaglyph, we get a nice 3D result. The second method of using it could be using an ST map, which is basically the same thing. You're going to be distorting the plate based upon the depth map information. Now in our case, we actually have a kind of nice node here that was put together by John Wallerton. He's going to be going through some stuff later on. And he kind of wrapped up an ST map into a custom gizmo that gives us a little bit more control over things such as interocular distance, convergence point, as well as a bit of pre-blur and pre-erode as well. So if I view that group, essentially, just in here, what we're doing is we're taking in that depth information, and through the use of a couple of expression nodes, we're taking it and converting it so that it can be used by the ST maps here. And you can see we have options to use it on both the left eye and the right eye in here. And finally, we're joining our views back together and outputting it to our main node graph. So if I view that at the very bottom, we get a slightly different result because we're distorting it in a different place, and the convergence point is in a different point in our comp. But as you can see, we get a result there. Now, I just quickly want to compare this with our original stereo plate. So this was the 2 shots, so the 2 cameras from the original project, and this is our finished shot using the custom depth map. Now you can see that they are a little bit different, and the reason for that is that, again, we're just using this kind of depth map in our own way. We're kind of choosing ourselves where things sit within the scene. So, just to go over that. So, the 2D displace method, the pros of this, very quick turnaround. You're not doing anything with the 3D department. You don't have to wait for stuff to come back from those guys. You have great creative control over exactly where things sit in your comp. Simply by grading up and down elements, you can move them forwards and backwards in 3D space, and most, if not all of it, can be done in Nuke. The cons, a lot of roto might be involved, which is never a fun thing, obviously. There's lots of guesswork where things sit within depth, and because you're not using 3D, there's no real defined camera, so you're not using a camera track from on set or anything like that to do this method. So that's 2D. So we're going to move on to 2.5D. At the very, very top here, you can see that not only do I have our original plate at this point, but I also have a projection cam, which is an original tracked cam from our project. So we're going to be using that a little bit later down the line. I'm just going to turn off our expression links quickly. So again, very, very similar to before. We need to extract the main elements that we want to see in our comp. Again, the boy, the dad, and the floor. So the first thing we're going to do with the boy is actually take the alpha mat that we previously created from over in this method of one section. I'm just going to pre-malt that over the original plate. So what we're now doing is just extracting the color information of that boy and maintaining that alpha channel as well. So we're going to do exactly the same thing on the dad, which you can see over here. So we have dad with the alpha channel as well. Now when those are created, we can then start using 3D geometry within Nuke. In our case, we're going to be using cards. Now in case you don't know, I'm sure pretty much everyone here is aware of cards within Nuke, but just in case, if I view this object and switch around in 3D, essentially a card is kind of just a flat plane in Nuke's 3D space. You can move it any way, you can subdivide it as much as you might want. And even you can go in and change the type to bicubic, and you can start going and distorting this in 3D space as well. But we're not actually going to be doing any of that. I'm going to switch that back to none. All we're going to be doing is projecting our images onto this card within 3D space. So as you can see here, underneath our boy comp, we have a project 3D node. And what we're going to be doing is projecting that image onto our card through the original tracked camera. So I'm just going to hook that up, and what we should see, if I view in the correct position, is that we now have a picture of our boy in the middle of our comp. So we have this 3D kind of representation of where our boy sits. And we do exactly the same thing for the dad, and I've just merged those together. And so you can see that in 3D space now we have these flat representations of those two characters. Now, flat is all well and good, and it's going to give you a fairly good result. However, if you kind of re-photograph this, as we're going to be doing with a right camera, you're not necessarily going to get as much movement as you would in real life. So what we're actually going to do is displace these plates. We're going to go in and use the displace geonodes that are available within Nuke to kind of alter the position of the vertices on these cards. So at the moment, you can see that these guys are flat. If I go in and enable these displace nodes, you can see that we're actually creating a little bit of displacement on those cards. And all this is taking in as input. We're taking in that original mat of the dad in this case. I'm just taking its alpha and lowering it slightly, like so, and we're just using that to displace it. It doesn't need to be particularly precise, it's just something to give it a little bit of depth there. So we've merged our geo together. I'm just going to hook this up to our scene. And if we view that and look through our camera, you can see that we've matched the position of them on our original plate. So with our characters done, it's time to move on to the floor. So again, we're going to take our projection camera, and we're going to bring in our rotated floor geometry, and we're projecting the original plate onto it. So you can see at the moment we've got this frame that we're currently on, and if I was to move through time, because the camera is moving, the image is always going to update correctly on the plate. However, as Naz covered earlier, we are going to want to clean this plate up a little bit. At the moment, we have these legs visible, shadows visible in the shot, and if we were to re-photograph that with the right eye, we'd see those things through that camera, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to quickly run through a version of the Nuke cleanup that you could do on this script. The first thing I did was plug it into a scanline renderer, and as you notice, I haven't attached a camera here, and I've gone in and set it to the UV projection mode. Now if I view this, what you should see is that what it's doing is it's rendering out basically a view of that UVs of that object, but with the image that's projected onto it laid over the top. So it's like a UV snapshot of what's currently sitting on that object. And this too animates over time. So I'm just going to set it back to our frame, and then from there what you can do is just basically go in and overlay different sections, choose things that you want to clean it up. So my method of doing that here was to do a frame hold on frame 375. I then went in and rotated out the bits that I didn't want from our scene, and then pre-molted it. Put a merge there for some reason, which I'll get rid of, and pre-molted it at the very end. So we just got rid of the bits that we don't want from that section of the image. In the second bit, I've frame held it at the very end of our shot. I've gone in and rotoed a few extra bits. For some reason, I'm doing merge again. There you go. No, wait for it. Wait for it. It's coming. No, okay, never mind. So I've gone in and there you go. So we have our roto shapes for that section. So we're keeping the bits in white, basically. And then once we pre-mold that, you can see that I'm keeping those bits. And just with a simple merge, we've cleaned up that plate a little bit. So if I merge this back over the original to fill in these holes, you can see that we've still got a couple of things we don't want in there. So I went in, did another frame hold, and then added a bit of roto paint. And if we let this calculate, you can see that things are looking a little bit more cleaned up in here. So that's the nuke version of this. Now what we do have as well is a Mari version. Now Naz earlier on rendered out that clean plate from Mari. So what we're going to do is go in and apply that as well to take a look at the difference between the two. So I'm going to quickly add this into our scene and view our scene node at the bottom and look through our camera. And I just have a switch node here, and what this is going to do, when this is on 0, we're looking at the nuke cleanup, and when it's on 1, we're looking at the Mari cleanup. So at the moment, this is the nuke version, and if I switch this to 1, we switched over to the Mari version. So at the moment, you can see there are a couple of differences, but the fact that you can go to Mari and paint this perhaps a little bit quicker than you could do with the Roto Paint node is a great thing. As soon as the workflow gets speeded up, the one-click thing that Naz was talking about as well, it should be a very, very good process. So that's pretty much our floor done and in place. Now the final thing we need to do, at the moment you see that we can't actually see the background of our shot. We need to go in and position that in 3D here. So I've taken our original alpha and I'm copying that in. It's working now, fantastic. Okay, so everybody loves the red stuff. So we're taking our original alpha and shuffling it into our original image. Is I'm inverting our alpha, which you'll see here. And then through a combination of filter erodes and pre-molds, like so, we've basically gone ahead and got rid of our characters based on that alpha mat. So once we do that, we need to go in and fill in the black areas. So I'm just going to quickly enable these guys and go down one by one. So the first thing I'm doing is a rough filter erode, which is just going to pull in those pixels into that black section. And then going to transform this over slightly and merge it back over the original, so to further kind of fill in those black holes. With that finally done, we can fill that in over the original comp. Now this isn't perfect, it's just a quick and dirty method of doing it. Obviously you'd spend more time going in and tweaking this yourself, but for now it works quite well. So with this done, we basically apply it to a card exactly like before, transform it into position, and if I now look through our scene, what we should see is that everything is in position. It looks very, very much like the original plate, but now in 3D. And as soon as you've done that, it's really just a case of rendering out through the scanline renderer and throwing it through an anaglyph node. And as you can see, we now have 3D depth within our scene. So that's the kind of 2.5D method. I'm going to quickly run through you guys. So the pros of this, you get real 3D space. You can definitely see where things are compared to other things within your scene. Cons, it can be slower than method 1, even though you are doing a lot of roto in method 1. You do need bits of that roto to do this as well, to get those projections on the cards really nicely. And it does rely still on rough approximations of that 3D depth. So there's nothing there that's saying this is the correct distance for a card, you're just positioning it so that it looks right. So that is the second method, which is 2.5D. And finally, we're going to look at fully 3D. Now for this, you need to go away and ask your kindly 3D department to go away and rotomate you bits of geometry. And just in case you don't know what that looks like, I have a quick setup here. So rotomation in this case is going away and adding skeletons to the bits of kind of footage and the characters that you already have on set. And when you have the skeletons looking roughly right, there's a couple of tweaks that I'm sure some of you have noticed in there, but once you have that roughly set up, you can go and roughly skin them. Now it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be enough that it's going to have the kind of correct depth in there for the character. So once you've done this, we basically end up with these animated bits in our scene, and of course this will animate over time, which is kind of cool, especially when he flips his arm around. Cool. So as you can see, it's a little bit rough, but it does the trick. Now once we've done that, it's really just a case of projecting our original plate back onto that material. So if I view this, you can see that we now have these objects in our scene textured with the original plate. I'm going to bring in the background, which was that last section we did in method 2. And with that done, I'm just going to render these out through the scanline renderer. And if I view this in anaglyph, you can see that we are getting nice 3D depth in that scene. Now, The issue with this is that it really does depend on the quality of your rotomation, because if it's off on any frames, bits of the plate are going to be missing. So what we thought we'd do is do a quick kind of ocular fix down here. And this is perfectly doable in any of the methods that we've got here, as long as you end up with a disparate kind of left and right eye. So what I'm doing with this is I'm taking the tracked camera, which is an optional step for the OSO, but it does make it a little bit better in this case. I'm feeding in our original scan line renderer to get the two images. I'm throwing that into a disparity generator to generate a disparity map between our left and right rendered eyes. And I've just written out our disparity, and I'm going to read it in and shuffle it back in to our original footage. As you can see there, we have our nice disparity map. And with that done, we're going to use the new view that Shervin went over earlier to create a brand new right eye from our original left eye. So it's going to take that left plate, distort it using the disparity mapper into a brand new right eye. And with that done, we can view it through an anaglyph node, and we have our depth based solely on that original plate. So this is going to be a really, really good method of creating that original depth. So with that done, I'm going to quickly run over some pros and cons of that. Pros, real 3D space to work in. Because you've got that match move geometry, you know exactly that this arm is kind of in front of this, and the depth from those two things is going to be pretty accurate. Now we have the cameras, we're working from the original tracked cameras from the comp, which is going to match what happened on set, always very useful. And we have the geometry, which closely matches anything in your scene. So if you've done, people, kind of buildings, anything like that, it's all going to be very, very close approximation of what was on set. Cons of that, you have to go off to the 3D department, obviously, which could result in a slower setup. I don't know, depends on what terms you're on with your 3D department, but slow setup potentially. Meticulous match moving and mind-numbing roto. The rotomation was just lots of coffee in that case, but it's never necessarily a fun thing to sit down and do. And yeah, the larger 3D pipeline, obviously, as you're going back and forwards. So those are the three methods of kind of stereo conversion, three of the many. So if there's any questions, take those.